So, hi all, I'm very excited to be here with Professor Gael following his talk on our DEB seminar, and now we have a conversation regarding his paper. So, Gael, thank you for coming, and we'll start from the first question. What are the main implications of your findings?
Yefim, thank you very much for this invitation and for the opportunity to follow up on my presentation. And thank you for the audience, to the audience for being here and listening to me again one more time. So let me remind you of the main idea of the paper. We're interested in situations where an agent is trying to understand or trying to decide what to do on the basis of observing several other people. And we are going to assume that these other people are belonging to a particular social groups. So I try to think of a situation where I join a new department and I'm trying to, or a new organization, and I'm trying to understand when I should come to work in the morning. Should I come to work before 8:30 or after 8:30? As it happens, among the people in my team, that will be the reference group, most people tend to arrive before 8:30, and a minority of people tend to arrive after 8:30. So the majority behavior is that arriving before 8:30. But as it happens, I usually don't see when people arrive, and I, in fact, only see when my office mates do arrive. And my office mates tend to arrive after 8:30. So most of my observation of arrival times tend to happen after 8:30. So this is the majority behavior, but the behavior of the majority is different. It's arriving early, before 8:30. So what should I do? Should I arrive early or should I arrive late? Should I follow the behavior of the majority or should I follow the majority behavior? In our studies, we found that people tend to follow the majority behavior and not the behavior of the majority. But we also got some evidence that they essentially want to follow the behavior of the majority, but they don't do so. And our conjecture is that at the time of making a decision, they do not recall the behavior of the majority. They do not bring it into working memory, so to say, or they do not retrieve it from memory in order to make a decision about that will consist in following the behavior of the majority. How did we find that? This is because when we give people a memory aid that reminds them of the experiences that they acquired, we see that they tend to follow the behavior of the majority. But without memory aid, they tend to follow the majority behavior. Now, where is this finding interesting? I think one of the key areas of applications pertains to how people form decisions about political support or support for particular policies on the basis of their media consumption. Suppose that I am a follower of a political party, and I want to support the policy that is supported by this party. Now, the political party doesn't have a unified voice. It doesn't always publish a statement about the party position. So how do I infer the statement or the position of the party about this particular policy? I look at what party members or politicians or elected politicians from that party write on Twitter, on Facebook, or what do they say on TV. And in such settings, it's quite likely, it can happen that the majority behavior will differ from the behavior of the majority. Why? Because some minority members of the party might hold a different opinion from the majority of the party members. And they might be more vocal because they want to convince others. Okay? So our findings suggest that participants will, or people will tend to misperceive the position of the party in the following sense. They might want to think that the position of the party corresponds to the majority position, or the position of the majority of party members, sorry, but they will end up believing that the position of the party corresponds to the majority of the messages that that they saw from the members of this party. Okay. Now, I don't have clear data about that, but my casual observations of how party dynamics works that frequently more extreme party members tend to be more vocal, for example, on social media. So if this is the case, more extreme party members will hold sway. They will be able to affect how citizens perceive the position of the party. Okay, a citizen that will want to perceive the position of the party as the position of the majority of the party members will not do so, and they will tend to be more severely or more strongly influenced by the majority of the voiced positions, which over-represents the positions of the more extreme party members. Okay? So well, I believe that our findings could contribute to explaining systematic bias in the perception of the positions of political parties in the direction of more extreme perception. So people will tend to perceive that parties are more extreme on some issues than what they actually are.
This is very interesting. Thank you for this great summary. Do I understand correctly? I can relate it to, in a sense, to the description experience gap, so that people want to behave in one way, but actually their experience leads them to behave so-called irrationally or in a more biased way, right?
Yefim, yes, it's a way of putting it, right? That
Mm-hmm.
If we give people a description of their experiences, right, in the form of a summary, comprehensive summary of their experiences, they tend to make decisions which are different from what happens when they're making the decisions just on the basis of the experiences without the summary, right? So now in our studies, we did not compare completely directly the description experience gap in the sense that we did not have a condition where people had no experience at all, just a description, but we can think of the situation of experience plus summary as a sophisticated form of description, so to say, right? And we see that indeed people behave differently in these situations. Now, interestingly, it's not only because of biased memory. Okay, in some of our studies, we assess people's recall of their experiences. The recall of the experiences is not perfectly accurate, right? But I think in one or two of our studies, we actually found that the order of the recalls was correct when we elicited the recall after the decisions. Okay. So it's as if people could recall correctly what is the behavior of the majority or the majority behavior, but they don't invoke this recall, or they don't do the mental work necessary to reconstruct this recall at the time of answering questions about the perception of what the group is doing or making a decision about what they should do. Okay, so biased memory might play a role, definitely plays a role, but there must be some other factors, and we're not yet sure what this can be.
I see, thank you. And I think, again, maybe I'm completely wrong, and correct me, it is related to your recent paper, congratulations, in the +1, is that outliers do matter, right? Am I correct? Can I make this connection that the opinion of outliers is important?
Indeed, in that paper, the paper is about different process in the following sense that the paper I presented looked really at information aggregation mechanisms, right? So we look at we are looking at how an agent or a perceiver perceives a group, so to say, on the basis of many observations, right? And indeed, we find that in the paper I presented in the seminar, those outliers, not in terms of extremity of opinions, but outliers in terms of frequency of exposure, right, are given more weight, right? Now, obviously, if those who are frequently expressing opinions are also more extreme in terms of the opinions that they express, right? There will definitely, our findings show that they will definitely have a very strong weight on impression formation, right? So in a way, we can connect this to a recent paper by Hans Alves and Andre Mata in JPSP about redundancy bias. Okay, our findings are a form of redundancy bias. Okay, when you see the same opinion, maybe it's the same extreme opinion expressed many times by the same source, okay, even though you might want to discount it, you essentially don't. Okay. Now, the paper we just published had a very different focus because it didn't look at how people aggregate information to form a perception or belief about the position of a group per se. Right? This other paper looked at basically.
In a way, you can think about punishing the party who express extreme opinion, right? Because
we could think about punishing the party that expresses yes, so that's interesting. So in that other paper, we basically the real title of the paper would be what if there was a dislike button on Twitter, or what if there was a detweet button on Twitter, right? And then the point of that paper is that if there was a detweet button or a dislike button on Twitter, we would be able to anonymously punish those who have extreme opinions on the other side, right? And we assume and we conjecture that when we have this anonymous punishment, issues of identities and backfiring effect, you know, when the other guy tells me I'm wrong and this other guy is from a different group that I dislike, right? It might reinforce my belief that I'm right. But if the negative feedback comes from an anonymous source, right? I cannot be sure that these people from the other group criticizing me. So I am probably going to be more receptive to this negative feedback. So one conjecture based on the point you made, DFM, and that paper is that if we wanted to punish these extreme parties or these extreme members of the party, or punish, not really punish, give them feedback that we disagree with them. If we had an anonymous way of doing it on the social media platforms, it might improve the likelihood that they, in fact, take this negative feedback as actual feedback and start changing what they write and maybe what they believe in ultimately.
This is very interesting. Thank you. So we will move on to the next question. How can your research findings be extended, especially in the domain of decisions from experience, in your opinion?
Okay, so in fact, what we're working on currently on a follow-up paper to that paper that applies these ideas to the domain of social media and voting on the basis of exposure to tweets. In fact, I was very happy to see that a master student from Heidelberg, Judith, had picked up on our paper with Thomas, the paper that preceded the paper I presented, and in fact started to work on opinion formation on the basis of tweets. And her and her advisors, Johannes Prager, contacted Thomas and I to join forces, and we are actually essentially now designing a paper that is implementing versions of or adaptations of the design of the studies I presented in the seminar to the domain of political opinion formation. Now, we have a theoretical twist, however, okay? So we are interested here in understanding how can we help people realize that when they follow the behavior, the majority behavior, they sometimes make a mistake. So in fact, instead in that follow-up paper, instead of giving a memory aid to help people follow the behavior of the majority, if they want to, okay, we will give people feedback. Okay, so they will see a set of tweets. They have to about particular issues from different party members, and they have to make they have to make a prediction. How will this party vote, right? And then we give them feedback whether the prediction is correct or incorrect, right? And then they have to move on to a new prediction task, which has the same structure but about a different policy issue, right? And we are trying to understand the conditions under which we can or people are going to pick up the feedback and learn to adapt their information aggregation rule in order to make better prediction. Okay, so that's the follow-up. So the follow-up has two dimensions: application to the formation of political opinion, and an investigation of whether feedback can help people realize that they make systematic mistakes and help them correct these mistakes.
That sounds very exciting. Good luck with this project, and I hope we will find it published soon, and then we will be able to learn from it and maybe invite you again. So now we will move on from questions regarding your research to questions regarding our community in general. So what is, in your opinion, the most pressing issue in the social science nowadays?
So I think the social science or I mean, the world in many ways, so the workplace in many ways, and social science in particular, is subject to a tectonic shift with the emergence of large language models that are going to have a dramatic impact on our society. Okay, so I think there are different issues here for social science to study. Okay? Can we understand, can we anticipate the shift or the effect of the large language models on the workplace, on the destruction of types of jobs and the emergence of new jobs? How can we incorporate and take them into account in the way we teach, the way we evaluate students, colleagues, the way we evaluate research? Okay, is it okay to have abstracts written by ChatGPT and to focus our attention on experimental design and data analysis, and let the text be generated mostly by a machine, so to say? So we urgently have to come up with collective decisions about how to deal with these issues, right? So let me backtrack. I think there are like at least three dimensions, three important questions that pertain to large language models. Okay, how do they affect jobs in terms of destruction of existing jobs? Workforce displacement, emergence of new jobs. Okay, how do they affect how people work and evaluate others? So when it's unclear whether the output produced by others is produced by people or by a machine. Okay, how people can use these tools to augment their minds, to be more efficient at repetitive tasks and allocate more attention and energy to the creative task that these models cannot do, right? So these are three. And a fourth element is how can we as social scientists use large language models for research, not only for paper writing, but for research, right? Can we use them to better understand people? Can we use them to as measurement devices? So, for example, in my current work, I am actually using large language models. I am proposing using large language models as a measurement device. I'm interested in understanding the similarity between text documents, so the typicality between of an object in a concept, which is essentially the similarity between a text and a concept. Okay? And I'm assessing the use of GPT-4 to do this in an automated way. Okay? So when we so why am I emphasizing the use of the last element? Okay, the use of language models as measurement device. It's because if we're interested in decision from experience, and we want to go beyond the button clicking paradigms, okay, if we want to observe how people react, learn from feedback, decide from their experiences, we have to represent their experiences in some sort of mathematical space, right? So my idea here is to use social media data to position text documents, namely social media posts that people write, okay, in some semantic space, and see how do people react from feedback, okay, and does it affect what they write about, right? Now, the large language models, they give us a fantastic new technology to represent these text documents into a space that will allow us to generate data that we can analyze using our reinforcement learning models and so forth, right? So large language models on top of presenting societal challenges that need to be understood by social scientists, right? They're being created by computer scientists, but social scientists need to assess the consequences of these social models on society. On top of this, they provide fantastic opportunities for social scientists in terms of new methods, and in particular, I think for us interested in decision from experience, in terms of new methods to represent actions and to study how people learn from experiences in naturally occurring environments.
Thank you. I definitely agree with you that this is very exciting opportunities and that all these new technologies are very disruptive, and only time will show how do we learn to use them in a good way. But I completely agree with you. So basically, that you say that to the decision from experience guys, it provides a new opportunity to gather new feedback or new feedback type to provide to participants in real time, to give them new type of feedback and learn a lot of new insights from that. Yeah. What is your opinion, the most impressive finding during the past 10 years? So from looking forward, let's look for a second backward.
I don't have a clear response to that, most impressive finding question per se, but I'm going to go back to large language models. So the most impressive scientific contribution in the last 10 years that is changing deeply science and social science is the release of the first large language models in the form of the BERT architecture. Okay, that was the first large language models. Okay, that came as an implementation of an insight about how language models could be trained and structured. That was published in a paper called "Attention is All You Need." So, in many ways, this "Attention is All You Need" paper
Is
is
all you need.
sorry.
I say is all you need.
It's all you need. Yes, it was all we needed, science or research needed to basically make breakthrough in machine-based understanding of language. And to me, it has dramatically changed, the way I do research. And I've seen in this summer that it has also changed the way many other people do research. And in fact, these large language models have become well known to the broader community with the release of ChatGPT, right? But this "Attention is All You Need" paper was published 5.5 years ago. Okay, so it's a very rapid change, but at the same time, there needed to be a bit of maturation before this the knowledge embedded in this paper got applied in such a way that it would reach the communities beyond specialists. So it's not a finding about how people behave, right? It's a finding about how to train a machine to represent text, right? That allows mimicking essentially how humans produce text, and the models based on these insights, they produce text that is virtually undistinguishable from that produced by humans, right? So this suggests that these models have some kind of semantic representations that matches well to some extent the semantic representations that humans do have. And some people have started to study that very seriously. One of them being Sudeep Bhatia was published very interesting papers, making the parallel between human learnings and learnings by these types of models.
And by the way, it goes in a sense to your previous answer, because can we even assess if the abstract is written by a human or a machine? And if we cannot, maybe we don't have to try to assess it if it's an impossible task anyways.
Exactly. No, I mean, related to this, I mean, there is a big question for researchers interested in these models, not only the people who design these models, but for those of us who use them, as I do for measurement, or use them as as analogical tools to understand human cognitions and so forth. So these models are producing a lot of text, and they are trained on text, which is presumably written by humans. But the content of the internet is going to rapidly change because these models can produce so much text. So what is going to happen when these models are trained mostly on output by earlier generations of models, right? Will they remain good models of human text production, so to say, or will this get into some kind of positive feedback loop that will converge onto a steady state that is quite far from the type of text that humans do produce, right?
This is very interesting questions, and I think only time will show, and I hope we will see. So, as a winner of ERC grant, and not only ERC grant, I'm sure you have a lot of experience with young scholars and the postdocs. So my next question is, what are your advices for the young scholars to succeed in the academia? And run out of the academia is also the answer. I'm just kidding.
So the first element of response is work hard. Any research is difficult. Any element of research takes more time than what you think. And even if you think it will take longer, it always takes longer than what you think, so to say. So we were talking about this with my senior colleague, Robin Hogarth, a key historical contributor to the JDM field, or early contributor to the JDM fields, right? And when we were talking to first-year students and so forth, what should we tell them? Work hard. Basically, your success will be heavily determined by the number of hours you spend doing research. Okay. So working hard means doing research, right? And I found it for myself that there is one area in which most researchers I know improve all their lives, is that they find a way to organize their lives to spend more time doing research instead of answering emails, engaging in administrative tasks, and so forth, right? So find a way to spend time doing research, to think, to design studies, to write papers, to improve your introductions, to improve your result sections, and so forth. So one has to find each one of us has to find their own way. Okay, so one way for me is, okay, I start my day, I do research, okay, and then I move on to other things, teaching related tasks, admin tasks, right? But I always start my day to do research and doing research, because I've noticed early in my career that maybe some trimester I was teaching a lot, designing new classes, and you do not do any research for 2 months, and then it's very difficult to get back to it, right? Yes, my first advice, basically find time to spend enough hours doing research, basically. Organize your life such that you can do that. Then about other advice, spend a lot of time writing. It's very difficult to write well. I always feel that some people must be writing well the first shot or second shot, but then I start to work with more and more co-authors, and I discover that nobody writes well in the first shot or second shot. For me, it's good writing comes after 50 times rewriting the same passage. Right? Young scholars usually don't see that. They have not yet experienced this, right? Sometimes they're very surprised when they get feedback that what they wrote is really not too well written, and then you ask them how many times they try to write it, and then you immediately understand why it's not good. It's because they didn't go sufficiently many times through the same piece of text. And unfortunately, ChatGPT is not going to help much for good writing here, because the point obviously is to clarify thoughts, right? Is to use the writing process as a way to clarify our thinking, right? If our thinking is not clear, our writing will never be super clear, right? So for me, it's a very long iterative process of rewriting, rethinking, rewriting, rethinking. And the colleagues, my co-authors, whom I believe are good writers, go through the same thing. Okay, so basically, I don't know anybody who produces nicely written papers and who doesn't go so many times through this process. Okay. And then the third point is be ambitious with the questions. Be ambitious with the questions. Okay. It's a vocational job, so it needs to be interesting to anybody involved in this job, right? So it's difficult. Many projects do fail, but the only reason to do this job is to be able to work on issues that we think exciting and interesting, right? So I would definitely advise young scholars to work on the topics and the research questions that they find exciting. Because you, at the end, you end up spending so many hours doing this that it has to be a vocation, so to say. So make research a vocation. And I say make it a vocation because when you start a PhD, it's not yet a vocation. Okay, I realized that when working with some first-year PhD students on some joint project, I was always much more excited about the project than they were. And I understood this is because the project came from me. And I really wanted to have to know the responses. So as a very early stage scholar, you have a goal, make it a passion, make it a vocation. I don't know how to achieve that. It happens sometimes. After a while, it happens. And Yefim, to come back to when to exit academia, if it doesn't become a passion, if it doesn't become a vocation, it's probably good to move to other things, basically. So, yeah.
Thanks. I think this is great advices because you speak about these challenges because in academia we have so many freedom. So be able to work, to find the time and the discipline to work. I'm so agree with you. It's so important because of the freedoms that we have.
Let me say one more thing that came to mind. Trick yourself in making it urgent. Research is never urgent. Grading is urgent. Answering students' emails is urgent. Okay? So you need to find ways to make research urgent. And one trick is to set deadlines. Sometimes if you set yourself the deadlines, they are slippery. So commit to submit your papers to conferences, to present them to seminars, and say, okay, look, EFM invites you to give a talk in 6 months. How about I'm going to talk about this? And you don't yet have a draft, but if you're committed to that seminar, you'll have a draft by then, or you will have clarified your thought before the presentation. So make research urgent to encourage focus, indeed.
This is a great tip. You can also work with demanding colleagues who are sometimes advantage or disadvantage, but those who, okay, so where are the results? Are you going to send them today or tomorrow?
Yeah.
It can also help. And by the way, about writing, I thought that it comes back to our first question about your research that you presented, because in a sense, you can think about the graduate students, they see only the final result. So this is why they think that it's so easy to write a very nice paper. So you have basically a biased feedback in a sense, right? So it's somewhat related, I think, to your paper, but from the other side, in a sense.
Yeah.
I think. Okay, we are going to our last question. What book would you recommend us to read?
So the best book of all books for me is Causality by Udaya Pearl. Udaya Pearl is a computer science professor at UCLA. I think he's Israeli, if I'm correct. And he was one of the key contributors to Bayesian networks in the 80s and 90s. And then in 98, he published his book Causality, which for me was the first book that helped me really understand what is a cause, which is a deep philosophical question. And a lot of us as researchers, we try to make causal claims, we try to understand causal mechanisms about how the world works or how the mind works, right? And I found this book, Causality, to be the most enlightening of all books I have read. It's a difficult book, but because it introduces formalism about how to think about causality. But I think that for Yeah, so basically, I think it's worth it. It's an effort that is definitely worth it. And if you go through that book, on top of this, you'll understand some important data analysis concepts like instrumental variables, which are used in economic research all the time. So there are side benefit to reading that book.
Thank you, Gael. It was very, very interesting, and I want to thank you for your time. It was thought-provocative conversation, and I want again to thank you for the time for this interview.
Thank you, Yefim. My pleasure.